Welcome back to the Real Couchwives podcast, where we overanalyze all things Bravo. This week, we are talking about Summer House Season 8, Episode 6.
So it is another week in the Summer House, and pretty much everyone is seeing the red flags between Lindsay and Carl. There are different conversations that are being had all over the place. Surprisingly, some of the girls are actually taking a more sympathetic stance towards Lindsay. And we also have an after show now, which is super exciting, where we get to see, some more insights from Kyle and Carl. Lindsay's continuing to kind of double down. And yeah, I'm super excited to see where that continues to go.
Super exciting to see, and also interesting again. Like last week, we were very much talking about the fact that like the dynamics of the group were a little bit changing because different players were coming in and out of the summer house and interacting with one another. And this week, we don't have Danielle and Gabby there, and I think that also speaks to why Paige and Amanda kind of step up and take the opportunity to see Lindsay's side of things, and also why I think Kyle takes advantage of Carl not being there and having some little heart-to-heart moments with Lindsay too. Maybe not heart-to-heart. Maybe that's too generous. Maybe just more like let's dig into this a little bit.
Yeah, that's a really good point actually, because I was like a little bit. I was a little surprised, and it also kind of brought a new way to look at the scenario. So yeah, let's get into this episode.
Yeah, let's do it. So the episode starts. They are about to sit down for dinner. Lindsay and Ciara, as you guys know, were cooking a Southern meal for the group. So they start to get that ready. Everybody starts to come to the dining room table. Lindsay decides to raise a toast to her and Ciara for cooking, which I think is adorable. And Amanda gets kind of like, asks a question to the group of like, okay, everybody share one good thing about your week. And we find out that Jessie went on 4 dates this week. 4 dates with 4 different women.
Mm-hmm.
So that is impressive because, gosh, who has the time?
Who has the time?
The time? Can barely get on one date with the one person I'm dating, let alone 4 dates with 4 different people. Kyle takes this amazing opportunity to stir the pot. As Craig is at the summer house this week as well, he wants to kind of bring up, oh, Jessie, now that this about Paige, how do you feel about the fact that you were hitting on her for so many first couple of weeks of the summer house? And Amanda is pissed.
Yeah, Amanda gets so mad. Also, I feel like the way this was brought up was actually a lot more casual than they made it seem in the trailer, which was like, they didn't have the intro part. It was just, do you want to rethink how hard you were hitting on Paige this summer? But when you saw it play out actually like based off of a joke of like, now that you know Amanda, Paige, what was it? Like
it was like, she like didn't like, she doesn't want to be the one to order at the restaurant. She wants the guy to be the one that orders at the restaurant.
Yeah. That being said, still very messy. It's still a very messy thing to bring up. Luckily, Paige and Craig are like very secure, and like it didn't. Also, I keep having to give it to Craig, man, but like that could have really riled up old Craig. Like I could have seen that really making him flip a switch in a past life.
yeah and I can kind of understand why Amanda was like so upset. Like I do think that she like got to a level that like I was not expecting, but I can kind of see why you'd be like, that could have like completely derailed this entire dinner. Like why would you do that? And luckily it didn't. Luckily, everybody had a pretty good sense of humor about it, but definitely a potentially awkward situation, especially on like the first night when like Carl's not there because there's not going to be any fighting this Friday.
Oh, yeah.
So
no Friday night fights.
Yeah. Instead, it was Kyle and Amanda getting to do their Friday night fight.
Well, even Paige says too, she's like, I think it's also just because she's still frustrated that she feels like Kyle's kind of like talking about her.
Yes.
They're just like, her kind of like contempt for him at this point is really like palpable. Like it's like it's so uncomfortable, and for like everyone in the house and like us watching.
When she said that she was so angry with him she couldn't even like didn't even feel like she was gonna go out or anything that night, I was like, oh, you can viscerally feel that. It was also interesting that it's just, I feel like Paige isn't doing like a huge amount of stuff this summer, but it is interesting how she does seem to be kind of like quite good at kind of like calling what's happening and like piecing together like, okay, this is why we're seeing Amanda react this way because of this, and this is why we're seeing Lindsay do this, it's because of this, and like she's really she's come to play. She knows what's up.
Yeah.
Love to see it. So the group goes out to a club. They're actually going to celebrate Christmas in July, which I kind of thought was a fun little idea. And Kyle decides that it's the perfect opportunity to take Lindsay aside and have a little chat about Carl and Lindsay's relationship.
Yeah, this was interesting. This is what, like, the second, third conversation I think Kyle has now tried to have with Lindsay on her
Mm-hmm.
own. How did
Mm-hmm.
you feel about it?
I mean, I always think it's interesting when Kyle decides to take this opportunity. He's like, okay, I'm super wasted or I'm a little wasted. Let's have a conversation. Let's get down to it. I guess they have to take advantage of the fact that they're at a club that's allowing them to film in the Hamptons. So they're like, well, we got to get some
Mm-hmm.
footage from this club and justify the production team being here. So maybe that's what he was thinking. But yeah, definitely interesting. So in this conversation, Lindsay kind of launches into, feeling like part of the issues that come up with her relationship with Carl is that if she has one sip of alcohol, she automatically like has to be on like her absolute best behavior. She has to be like a super happy Stepford wife for Carl. Otherwise, he's gonna like fly off the handle. And I don't know if that's accurate. Like, I think it's not inaccurate, but I also think that it's like that's kind of a convenient excuse for like some of the conversations that you and Carl have been having this summer because part of what you've been fighting about is like you getting drunk and then accusing him of breaking his sobriety or not having perfect sobriety or
Yeah, yeah.
whatever,
But
right?
yeah.
So,
This is
yeah.
a thing actually, and you know what starts to make me think as well, because I was a little surprised later on to see the Paige and Amanda being like, Lindsay, we're on your side. We feel
Hmm.
bad for Lindsay, because I
Hmm.
feel like we've just been so off put by, Lindsay coming at Carl, questioning his sobriety, and just being
Hmm.
like completely outrageous,
Yeah.
that it is possible that these types of things are happening. We also know that
Hmm.
Carl doesn't like confrontation, and he kind
Yeah.
of wants to keep up with appearances that things are good. Like, there's probably pieces of truth in that. Like, I'm sure it's not
Hmm.
completely fabricated, but because we've now seen, the way that Lindsay's been acting, and also the way that she has just totally distorted situations,
Hmm.
and we can't really trust her as like a reliable narrator. So it's just hard to feel sympathetic to her after seeing all the things that we've seen.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, I don't doubt that she does feel judged when she's drinking by Carl. And I don't doubt that she internalizes that or she can feel that pressure. She can feel those like external eyes on her, especially when you're drinking. Like, you do become a little paranoid. Your senses are a little bit heightened in certain
Mm-hmm.
ways. And the, you know, your ability to go from like 0 to 100 is also in a different space. But yeah, I can't, help but kind of feel like maybe part of the reason that Carl has an issue with you drinking and he would be fine with like some like a partner that was drinking if they weren't somebody that behaved in the way that she behaves when she's drinking. And like it just feels like again so incompatible, these these
Yeah.
like two personality traits and the two ways that they want to be. Like I think that Carl does want somebody who like is reserved and can keep it together and isn't sloppy and isn't messy and doesn't have like these like outbursts when she's drunk. And it's not fair for Lindsay to be in a relationship where she can't fully kind of like express all of her emotions and can't fully feel herself the way that she is. And it's just
Yeah.
like
And
these are just incompatible
I think
people.
yeah, I think incompatible is definitely the right word. Even when they're talking about more like intimate type of things, like I think
Hmm.
they just both can't love each other the way that they want to be loved.
Yeah.
And the only way that maybe they're able to do that is if they were not like changing for the other, but like kind of, right? Like,
Hmm.
also the beginning of their relationship, I totally forgot, but Lindsay mentions it in the after show. Like, at the beginning when they started dating, like Lindsay also stopped drinking to help Carl meet his like 1 year of sobriety. And that was the beginning of their relationship. Also, the beginning of the
Yeah.
relationship is new and it's fresh, and like
Hmm.
the way that you act in year one is not the way that you act all the other years. So maybe, they did just both think that it was going to go a different way. Like, I think Carl also
Hmm.
mentioned, like, we're growing up, and I thought she would grow up too, and I thought she would change
Yeah.
too. And like,
Yeah.
I guess when she started to go back to like the way that she normally is, maybe he was like, wait, what?
100%, 100%. That's just it. I think you are a version of yourself when you're in like the early stages of a relationship, but you're not your full self. Like you're never going to be your full self. And I think like choosing to get engaged like within less than a year of being together, you unfortunately like haven't seen like every single version of this person that you're supposed to spend the rest of your life with. So like the person that they were like saying like, yes, I'm committed to you, is a very different person a year later when they're like, oh, this is who I'm actually committing to.
Yeah, it's so
You're not
true.
the same person.
And then also add on top of that, I feel like their first beginning of their relationship was so, we said that it felt a little forced and put on because like, so many people were seemingly against it that they felt like they
Yeah.
had to be this
It
perfect
was like us
couple.
against the world,
Yeah.
100%. Yeah,
Like you do
totally.
wonder like how many of these moments that they spent together were really genuine. Like how
Yeah.
can they be this close to marriage and only now finding out all these things about each other? Not to mention they've been friends for like a
Yeah.
decade.
Yeah. I know, but it's so like different because I think that there's like for Carl, there's like his past life and
It's
his
true.
current life. And so I do think that like
But
when
Lynn's
he yeah, but that's just it. Like when he and Lindsay were like friends before, they were friends in a different way and like they were different people versus like he was kind of starting from like zero when he became sober and like started a new
yeah,
version of his life, right? And he
that's
didn't know
fair.
himself, let alone his best friend.
Yes, but on Lindsay's half, like we literally just went back and rewatched some of the first episodes of Summer House to do a Where Are
Mm-hmm.
They Now? That you should check
Mm-hmm.
out if you haven't. And it was actually kind of shocking to be like,
Yeah.
we're seeing very similar versions of Lindsay now that we did the
Yeah.
first season with Everett.
Yes. And actually somebody one of the people I watch on TikTok, he was saying that he was like doing his first rewatch of his first watch of all of Summer House, and he's like, wow, by the time that I've gotten to season 3, like I'm finally seeing like single Lindsay and I actually like her. And it's like, yeah, maybe that's what we liked. Maybe we liked single Lindsay. Maybe like there's just like something that happens like in when she's in kind of like a relationship where like it's just she just kind of becomes a little bit different or we see her differently or I don't know.
Yeah, well, we know she has abandonment issues. That I
Yes.
think that's what comes on a lot of the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. Well, and that's actually kind of interesting because we get to the end of this conversation with Kyle and Lindsay, and one thing that she says is, like, I don't want to talk about this anymore. I don't want to cry tonight. I've spent so much time crying. And it's just like, oh, honey, like this is the person that you're supposed to be in a relationship with forever, and you're spending this much time crying or
Yeah.
like whatever, like before you guys get married. Like that's shouldn't that be a red flag? Like shouldn't that be
Yeah.
something? I don't
Yeah.
know.
And later on, she's like, I've seen a lot of little flags, but I don't
Yeah,
think they're
miniature
like
flags.
enough. It's like, no,
It's
girl,
like
these are
no,
giant. Like, these flags are not miniature.
you should not be crying. Like you should not be crying so much that you can't cry tonight because you just like cried so much already. Like that's not good. We want
Yeah.
we want better for you. We want
To
better
be
for
honest,
everybody.
we said this when it first broke. And then I think
Mhm.
we just got like a little taken aback by like all these accusations we're seeing Lindsay throw out that like I'm sorry, I can't move past them. Like they're so
Yeah.
wild and I haven't seen her backtrack them at all. But like
Mhm.
ultimately this is really sad. Like
Yeah.
this is like such a long friendship, such a good
Mhm.
friendship that
Yeah.
will never come back.
I
And
know.
like it just makes me sad for
Yeah.
both of
Well,
them.
and even I think it was in the after show, which you guys should be watching if you haven't watched it yet. They just started it this week for
Mhm.
Summer House.
I'm so happy.
It was so good. But they did like a flashback of Carl and Lindsay's relationship, and even in those like couple moments, like little tiny slices that they showed us, I was like, yes, okay, this is why we shipped Carl and Lindsay. Like there were things in their relationship that were just so cute, and we were just like, oh my god, yeah, this makes sense. These people are clicking. This totally makes sense that these guys would go down this route together. And so it does kind of make you feel a little bit sad to like see that this relationship has like devolved and gone in the direction that it has, and not only is it like a relationship but like a partnership I guess that's like been dissolved, but it's like a friendship as well, or a romantic relationship and a friendship that have like you know come apart, and
Yeah.
maybe there's room in the future for them to be friends, and who knows, but we'll see.
Yeah.
Anyways, so yeah, so that's kind of the gist of that Friday night. The group goes home. Kyle eats too many Sour Patch Kids and thinks that he's going to throw up. The group wakes up the next day, and Jesse goes and joins West and Ciara in bed. Super cute, love it, adorable.
I love this threesome. Like, they are just so cute together.
I know. I really enjoy them. I really enjoy them. And then Amanda goes and joins Paige and Craig. Sorry. Paige and Craig in bed. I was like, wait a minute, who? Yeah, Paige and Craig in bed together as well. Lindsay gets a text from Carl that he's kind of en route and that he's going to be there at 11. Jesse actually takes the opportunity to FaceTime Carl and like get like an ETA from him. In the midst of this kind of like FaceTiming, Lindsay has like kind of like come into the room, and basically like when he's like on the call with Carl, she like walks back out and she's like, and there's a little bit of like oh, that's kind of weird, like you didn't want to talk to your fiance, or like there's no, oh hey Carl, I don't know, like
so
Jesse
awkward.
was talking to Carl. No, okay. Anyways,
no,
yeah,
we're good.
Moving on.
Yeah, and everyone's just kind of being like,
yeah, okay. You do you, boo. You do you. Anyways, and so this is the opportunity that Paige and Amanda kind of also get to talk about how they're actually feeling bad for Lindsay in this moment specifically. Amanda kind of identifies that, yes, Lindsay says like these like nasty, like low things during their arguments and in the heat of the moment. But ultimately it kind of feels like she's like insecure about like the bigger picture stuff and like the things that are happening in their relationship. And they're kind of like starting to finally see that side of the Carl and Lindsay dynamic.
Yeah. Well, that's what's funny is like them having this kind of like intimacy talk is what made the girls be like, oh, yeah, there's something that there's some sort of level of rejection here that she's feeling, and like I think that's what makes them start to kind of like soften to her a little bit. And Paige does bring something up that is true, like because I think everyone's all very kind of like not worried about Carl because he's been doing well, but like everyone wants to protect his sobriety and his peace and his mental state because of the journey he's bringing on. So when they get into something, everyone's like, how's Carl? And no one's like, how's Lindsay? And that's fair, but Carl's also not saying crazy outlandish things about I just don't understand how no one's making a bigger deal about the accusations that she's made except for like Jesse and Ciara.
And Gabby a little bit, but like, and even in this summer, because of what happened last summer with Danielle, like typically Danielle would be the person in Lindsay's corner there to kind of like back her up and like be the one checking on her, seeing how she's doing. But unfortunately, because they had that rift the summer before, Lindsay now doesn't really have somebody in her corner to kind of like help, like be like, hey, is everything okay? You get like Gabby's a little bit there, but it's still kind of not really in the same way, and it's tricky for Gabby, I think, too, because she does feel like she's friends with both Carl and Lindsay, and so just to walk a fine line.
I also think maybe they didn't all know the extent of how bad it was. Like I know Danielle has come out and said it later. Ciara obviously is very triggered about it because of her past, and Jesse was also just like, dude, what is happening? But
and that's also the issue with these conversations happening like in these Lyft rides, right? They're only hearing about them secondhand the next day and not really getting like, the full picture of like what happened.
But just like the girls having this dance makes me just realize like I'm sure there were a lot of these issues too where you would feel bad for Lindsay as well. Like Carl, like I'm not saying that Carl is an angel. Like we do know,
we've seen sides of Carl too, right?
That's it. And even the lack of confrontation, like even they bring it up in the after show a little bit we could get into, but like, him deciding not to come to the Hamptons on Friday to not have a fight rather than like face it. Is, his deflection, or not deflection, but like his kind of like not wanting to have a confrontation.
Like I'm going to fully remove myself and not even hang out with my fiance because that's the only way to resolve and make sure that we don't fight tonight is if I'm not there. Like,
well, that's it. But it's just like, because of what we've seen first, it's just really hard to have space to feel more sympathetic just because of the way that she's been acting. And then also like when she does get a chance, and also the whole PR ride that she's been on, like trying to drag
Yes.
Carl before this, like all of these things add up to us having a hard time feeling bad.
Yeah, it does. And that's just it. And Carl did, I think they both had PR strategies kind of going into this breakup or like coming out of this breakup. And Carl's very much has been like, hey, let's wait and see, let's let it play out. Like you guys will make your own decision.
Which now we
and
know why. Like,
but it is. It's like it's a strategy, right? It's totally as much a tactic as her own strategy, and it's just two different approaches to the same problem.
true. I mean, as Kyle says later in the after show, it's like she forgot that we filmed a show.
Yeah,
Like,
100%. But, and I'm now playing devil's advocate again, I feel like, but we also haven't seen the actual fights, right?
It's
that
true.
actually happened between them. And I may be eating my words in a couple weeks when we see the actual breakup happen live in person, or not live in person, but you know what I mean? But yeah, we'll see.
That's, and Lindsay's also brought up some other things now that I'm thinking too, when she's like, I've seen, you know, he said some, he basically made it seem like he says pretty bad things to her, or like that he has like some demons that come out.
Yes, totally.
And again, it's just like, maybe that's true.
Yeah.
We don't know. Yeah. But in light of everything that you've been doing, you can't keep pulling on that. Like, even in the after show, she'll be like, oh, he ran away, he didn't face me. It's like, yeah, that's true, but like, until you actually try to fess up for what you said, like, we're not really like, why are you choosing to just continue to poke at, well, he did this?
Yeah.
Okay, I think I've made my point.
But I completely agree. Like, it's just, I don't know, it's just interesting to see how she's kind of like going about it and revisioning all of this history, and even like bringing in the idea of like this like Stepford wife version of herself that needs to exist in this conversation with Kyle in this episode. Is like, well, that's convenient, because I thought it was that you were claiming that he wasn't sober and he was upset about that, but now it's because you're not a Stepford wife.
Yeah, well, okay, I'm so sorry, last thing, but I was watching I was listening to the Viall files, because apparently I listened to that after we did the fact check episode where he had the Toms on. It actually kind of convinced me to want to watch a show, which I never did before.
Nice. Hey, there you go. I love that.
But it's so funny, he's talking now because he had Lindsay on right before the show came on, and that's when she was very much being like, I was blindsided, we had a great summer, it only came, it only got bad at the end, and I was so surprised. And he's even like, even Nick Viall saying like, yeah, I don't really understand why she did that. He's like, we had her on and we were like, thank you so much for being brave enough to tell your truth on our podcast.
Yeah.
He's like, and now I'm watching the episode and I'm like, what?
It does kind of make me want to go back and rewatch that episode now and like compare it to what we're seeing. Maybe we should do that. That'd be kind of fun. That'd be interesting.
That's a really good one. Let us know if that's something you want us to do.
Write that down.
But yeah, just like, because it's true, like, he is kind of sitting there feeling like kind of lied to, and then he like gave her gave her a platform to come just say all of this like lies. And they were like applauding her.
Well, I mean, he gave the platform to Tom Sandoval too.
That's true.
You can't completely absolve yourself there, Mr. Nick. Anyways. So Carl arrives at the house. They get started to they start to get ready for the day. They're just going to be setting up because they have a Hamptons Speedway themed party that they're going to host that day, which was a super cute, super fun theme. I loved this.
It was so fun. This has to be one of their best themes.
It makes me want to dress up like that. Like, I think that'd be so fun.
And Ciara as the like wacky inflatable. I'm sorry,
two-man thing.
This is Ciara's season. Like, this is 100% Ciara's season. I'm loving her this season so much. And also the fact that she like was this crazy thing and then takes it off and is just like stunning, beautiful supermodel.
Yeah, I know. That's just it. She's like, oh, underneath this, here, bikini model. Don't mind me. It's just so casual the way that she just like unpeeled it, and she's like, this isn't me now.
But too. I love that she can be both, and that was so fun.
Exactly. Get you a girl who can do both. So they start to get set up. Craig and Ciara actually go for a beer run, and this gives them an opportunity to kind of like chat about like the Ciara and Wes situation, and also talk about the whole Austen situation a couple summers back. And this is also when Kyle and Wes, we kind of have like the juxtaposition of the two conversations happening
Yeah.
simultaneously, of Kyle and Wes then kind of like getting that information out to West too, because this is his first time hearing about the Austen of it all.
The Austen of it all. I just really liked when Craig's like, yeah, you kind of go for goobers.
I know, I'm just like, yeah. Wes is like 100% so much better than Austen, though. I really hope she looks back and like doesn't regret her West decision in the same way that she regrets her Austen
No, it
decision.
seems like they're still friends from what I can like
That's good.
gather. But
Okay,
Wes
that's
does
good.
say that we're gonna see it play out. So I guess
Okay.
I feel like it'll start and end on the show.
Ooh,
Um
exciting.
it's just like, why do we keep comparing Austen and West? They're like so different. Like
But they also are like, if you literally look at them, you're like, oh yeah, I can see the type. I can see it. The archetype is there.
but Austen is nowhere near as funny as West.
No, he's not, but I can definitely see how they kind of like fall under the same profile. They check a lot of the
Mhm.
similar boxes. I think the key kind of thing that like comes out of this is that we have Ciara kind of open up again about like how it's really hard for her to put herself out there. This is something that she's like still not living down like all these years later. And like, it's one thing for you to kind of like look back at yourself and be like, oh, that was such a stupid mistake, but then to hear like the audience and like everybody forever and ever be like, why'd you make out with Austen? Why'd you hook up with Austen? That was a horrible decision. It's like, yeah, great, thank you so
Yeah.
much, as if I didn't already know that.
There was actually a really sad thing that she said that was like, when you have people being like, you're an idiot or whatever, and just saying these things that you like
Hmm.
already thought about yourself, you're like,
Yeah,
oh,
yeah, I
that's
know.
that's
It
that
does, yeah,
hits.
it does make you think about how you criticize these people, like for putting themselves out there, right? Like they're at least brave enough to do that. We might as well just be a little bit nicer to them, except for
Yeah.
Tom Sandoval. It's the one place I will draw the line. um, so the group gets ready for the party. Kyle is dressed up as a mix between Evil Knievel meets Elvis. Craig is kind of dressed up as like an extra from Grease Lightning, Grease, which I loved. I thought he looked really good. And then yeah, as you mentioned, Ciara is dressed up as the wacky waving inflatable tube man
Yeah.
costume. Um, yeah, honestly, everybody looks really good. I think
Everyone
this is
looked
such a good theme.
amazing. I am
This
like
was so good.
beyond jealous of all the girls and their like upper abs.
The crazy, yeah, literally.
And like Paige literally always talks about how she doesn't work out and she just
Yeah.
eats. And I'm like, what? I
How?
hate you.
What? 100. Yeah, it makes no sense. Um, Paige and Amanda have a little chat about the apartment situation. And this is kind of where we get a little bit of Paige's explanation of kind of like why she wouldn't let Craig contribute to the apartment in New York, and how she just really doesn't want to have a situation in which somebody can hold something like that over her because of like a past relationship where somebody did very much be like, well, when you pay for the flights, you can decide when the flight takes off, kind of
That's so awful.
thing.
I definitely
Yeah.
understand where she's coming from that. And also, I think that's really commendable and respectable that she wants to make her own money and she
Hmm.
wants to like I think eventually they're going to have to get to a point where they're going to have to like Craig's going to have to get a say in some things,
Yeah, of
right?
course.
Like
Of
part of it
course.
feels like a control issue that she
Yeah.
but like ultimately being like I just want to be able to depend on myself and I want to know that
Hmm.
these things like I did them and I totally understand
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, exactly. And that's just it. Like it's very different for her to be kind of like giving like a little bit of input here and there on like the design or whatever his house looks like, but at the end of the day, like it's his house, right? He owns it. It belongs to him. He will be the person that, will hold it as his property. And like, in New York, like she's maybe not going to be able to like buy real estate. Who knows? Maybe she could. I don't know. Um but she can at least still kind of like have a space that is her own and have like the lease in her name and have like that
Yeah.
sense of
And
independence.
I just hate that everyone's looking at her being like, "Oh my god, like are you not certain of your relationship? Like why don't you want him to pay?" It's like
Yeah,
let the
yeah.
girl be independent. Like
What does it matter? It's so confusing. Well, and this is actually interesting too, because in this conversation, Amanda takes the opportunity to kind of talk about how she, as one half of the founding of Loverboy, has made like really big contributions to the company, and she never really gets the recognition for that. Both in the fact that like she doesn't get the recognition of kind of like how she left like her stable job, and she had a stable job before
yeah.
Loverboy, and she was kind of like the breadwinner out of the two because Kyle put all of his money into Loverboy for a while. Um, but then she's also been like, the brains behind part of the operation, and she's like come up with the design and come up with ideas for the actual flavors and everything like that.
It's so true. And all she does is get painted as lazy, like
Yeah,
constantly.
exactly. She's lazy. She doesn't want to take phone calls. She doesn't want to be there early on Monday morning, and she doesn't want to contribute. And she just wants to go live in the New Jersey and like
I
live an
mean,
easy life.
a lot of people have been saying too, like they just need some sort of separation. Like
Yeah.
it's just like it's too many things tied up together.
Hmm.
And yeah, Kyle expects so much. Like he himself is a workaholic and he expects
Yeah.
her to also be a workaholic. And that's not fair. Like she's contributing
Hmm.
plenty from what it looks like.
Yeah.
And also like, not to bring it to things about anyways,
Yeah.
something that really bothers me all the time is like when someone's not getting recognition, because recognition
Yeah.
is like the easiest thing to give to
It is.
someone, and it's one
100%.
of those things that if you don't get it, it can like chip away at you. And it's like
Yeah.
if she's not getting it from her own husband, like I do feel for her.
That's just it. If you're not getting it from him, who are you going to get it from, right?
Mm-hmm.
100%. Well, and also I think it makes me think about like the Carl situation too last summer, right? Like Carl specifically removed himself from the lover boy like family, let's say, because he felt like he wasn't really getting like the recognition that he needed. He
It's
wasn't really
true.
getting like the support that he needed, and he needed to just be able to kind of like remove himself from that situation. So maybe Kyle does need to kind of examine a little bit of the environment that he's creating at this company that he's founded, and
Yeah, that's a good point.
you know, room for growth for everybody. So I don't, the shenanigans ensue. Wes gets injured in a little race. There was a lot of blood.
There was a
There
lot of
was
blood.
a lot of blood from sunglasses are dangerous, guys. Don't bike in sunglasses. Don't bike in sunglasses. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's the moral of the story here. Yeah, Wes gets stitched up. He and Ciara kind of go and have a little bit of the chat about the Austen situation again. Ciara basically talks about how she considered it to be a massive mistake. She doesn't regret it, but obviously she could go back and like change things. She would have been maybe a little bit more cautious. And Wes just kind of feels, I think, relieved or like maybe confident in the fact that they're talking about it is a good sign for what could be their future together, I
Right,
guess,
because
too.
she like trusts him. Also, it makes you understand,
Mm-hmm.
I think, a lot more of why she wants to move so slow with West and like why
Yeah.
she keeps things so close to the chest, because she was
Mm-hmm.
embarrassed on national television.
Yeah. Yeah. Austen, not a good guy. Not a good guy. West, hopefully,
Not to
better
date.
guy. No, exactly. Maybe to hang out with, he'd be fine. Who knows? So Paige and Craig then have a chance to kind of chat about the apartment situation again. Paige talks about how she very much wants things to be 50-50. And this is so great. Because he's like, oh, like I want to be able to contribute. And she's like, well, like I don't want this to feel like because I'm not accepting the money from you that we're not going to end up together. Like it's not one of those like equivalent things. Like we're still going to end up together. And she's like, basically save the money now and put it towards a ring for me later. And I love that.
Yeah, that's such a good, nice way to
It's a
put
good
it.
line. It's a good line.
I also can't believe that. Sorry, I'm still
No,
on this
no.
from last week
Yeah.
when Craig was like, I hope we end up together, but if we don't, like, I'm still going to continue to be the person I am. And it's
Mm-hmm.
probable that we don't. Like, just talking about statistically from long distance, so
Yeah.
many people have latched onto that to be like, oh my God, he thinks they're going to break up. There's like,
I
I saw like
know.
news headlines like, very probable that Paige and Craig break up. And it's like, that's not all what he was saying.
If anything, well, and I think I skipped over it here, but if anything, like Paige acknowledges the fact that they're having these conversations now is what is like allowing them to know that they're probably going to be in a good place when they do get to the point where they're ready to like settle down, because they've already had the conversations about like, well, how do we split up finances, and like how do I own things and you own things, and how do we kind
Yeah.
of like look at that, and like you have to put in this work now in order to be able to take those next steps down the line.
Things that apparently no one else has done on this show, other
Never,
couples.
never, not a chance. I think that we got like a little bit of a conversation about a prenup between Amanda and Kyle, but I think that was about
It
it.
was
It
like
was
right
pretty
before the
pretty
wedding.
limited. It was literally right. I think even like wasn't it not even ready for the wedding?
Yeah.
Classic, guys. Come on, get your act together. They also were engaged for like 3 years. Like, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Come on, you didn't. Anyways, whatever. Okay, so we get to kind of like the last couple scenes. We have a little sit down here between Paige and Amanda and Lindsay, and we have another little sit down kind of happening between the boys with Carl. And both of them are chatting about kind of like the dynamic and the relationship and what is going on and how do they go forward from here. Basically, Paige, I think this is really smart. She starts off the conversation by being like, I think it was really great that you were so open and honest, and thank you for doing that. Like yesterday in the conversation that they had in Lindsay's room, always a great way to start a conversation like that is
Mm-hmm.
you prime somebody so that they can be more open.
Yeah.
This is take notes, people. Take notes. Basically, what kind of happens in this conversation between Paige, Lindsay, and Amanda is Lindsay kind of talks about how this is her first relationship where she's dealing with somebody who is not only sober, but they're also kind of having like some intimacy issues. And these are kind of like two new territories for her. So kind of like navigating that is difficult. And I think that that's very valid.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Amanda kind of brings something up interesting as well in this conversation. She says that like she thinks that I think she actually I can't remember if this was in a confessional now or if this was in the actual moment. But basically, Amanda like identifies that she thinks that what happens here is that when Carl and Lindsay got into a relationship and they got into like a more serious version of that relationship, Carl kind of assumed that Lindsay would no longer treat him the way that she treats other people.
Yeah, I think that was in her
It was
confessional.
in her confessional. Okay, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that makes sense because it does feel like it was one of those things that's a little bit too smart to think of in the
Yeah.
moment. And I think that that's like amazing. Like that is so spot on. That is 100%. I think what happened here, right? Because Carl was like, yeah, like me when he like talked to Jesse about it earlier in the summer. Like he was like, yeah, maybe like I thought we were kind of both maturing and we were going in a direction where this wasn't going to be a thing that we were having anymore. And I think that there was a time when, at the beginning of their relationship, like Lindsay was, like she wasn't drinking, they were on a good place, like they were, they did maybe feel like they were kind of like growing in a different direction. And Lindsay probably was on her best behavior, let's say, at the beginning of the
Mm-hmm.
relationship, because as you say, you typically are on the best behavior when you're at the beginning of a
Mm-hmm.
relationship. Like you're a version of yourself. You're not your full
Yeah,
self. You're a
yeah.
version of yourself. Um, and so to now be kind of like experiencing this version of Lindsay that like everybody else has experienced before, where they're like, Lindsay, you're really like out of pocket right now and like you're really hard to deal with. And like I didn't expect to experience that with you because I thought you'd have more respect for me as your partner. Um,
Yeah.
and it's interesting because Danielle brings this up in the after show where she's like, yeah, that's exactly how I felt last summer because I'd been so ride or die for Lindsay and then I couldn't believe
And
that
then
she
it
was
turned
talking to
on
me.
her.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
It's just like,
that's it too. Like I know there's you can understand one part of Lindsay being like she feels that he wanted her to just be happy and or just be fun, and if she wasn't
yeah.
any of those things then he was upset. And it's like part of me is like, was it that, or is it that when you drink you get extremely defensive, you get
Mm-hmm.
pretty volatile, and like you say
Mm-hmm.
some pretty crazy things, and it's like and I feel like that's the kind of gray area that's missing. Is it's like he's not
Yeah.
saying don't drink, and he's even
Yeah.
said this before. He's like, it's just like you drink and then your whole personality changes. And before she's like, the way that she's framing it feels a little unfair that she's like, he wants to change everything about who I am. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like, I don't think that's true. I think he just wants you to like maybe tone down the drinking a little bit, or like not
Yeah.
fly, or like
Yeah. If not
be
fly off the
more in
handle or,
control
yeah.
in that
Yeah.
way and not get super mean.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, and so I didn't bring it up earlier because I feel a little bit awkward about it. But like one of the things that she says in her conversation with Kyle at the beginning of this episode is she says of Carl like, "You want to yell at me for drinking when I'm not the one that has a problem." So like that's Carl like being like, "You have a like." Like she doesn't think that Carl can yell at her basically because she's not the one that has a drinking problem. He's the one that had a drinking problem, and we can't diagnose her. We can only talk to what we see. We only see a really short period of time, and this period of time that we see her like over like the last like 7 or 8 seasons is like it's a moment in time, right? But to a degree maybe it feels like you maybe do have a drinking problem and maybe you should reevaluate your relationship with alcohol. And
Or at least like its ability to trigger her in
yeah.
acting
Yeah.
a
And
certain
like,
way, which is also what happened with Craig. Like
but
Craig was noticing about himself that he didn't like the way he
this
would be
version,
acting and this version of
yeah,
himself. And
yeah.
it doesn't mean that Craig has a drinking problem, but he realizes that there's like kind of a negative relationship that he can have to alcohol, and he did something to change it that worked for him.
Well, that's just it. I think I'm just trying to mute myself, and that I did it at the wrong time. And that's just it, right? Like, I think, you don't want to say anybody has like an alcoholic or is like a drinking problem or like whatever, but like I think you can still see people's relationship with alcohol on all of the Bravo shows that we've seen, and I think, yeah, a lot of people do have really interesting relationships with alcohol, and it's nice when you see somebody like Craig, or even Kyle, maybe a little bit now, like we're hoping, um, take a step back and maybe like, maybe I do need to kind of reevaluate how I interact with this substance, and like,
And I
that's not
don't
a
think
bad thing
that's,
to
no,
do.
it's not anything to be ashamed of either. Like,
No. And
even like, I feel super hungover after I drink even like the slightest amount, and I'm like, I don't
yeah,
like that, and
yeah,
I'm like, I'm
yeah,
not able to bounce back the way that I was when I was like in my 20s. Obviously it's like super
exactly.
different, but it's like, you
Yeah,
can like make these like little realizations and kind of like adapt behavior.
yeah. No, 100%. That's just it. I had like one bad night, November 2020, what was it, 2022, 2023, and I like, ever since, I have not been able to like drink the way that I did back then, and like, you know,
Oh,
one bad night, like that could do it to you, right? Like,
honestly, okay, totally unrelated to literally everything, but I've been binge watching season 6 of Vanderpump Rules just because
yeah,
it was on. They
so
had it on
good.
the plane, and then it just kind of
Hmm.
got me into this loop.
Yeah,
But I'm like, at this time, a lot of them are in like their mid 30s or early
yeah,
30s,
yeah.
and they're going out like every night.
Going
And I'm
ham.
like, how? Like, honestly,
Even,
just watching it makes me
yeah,
feel sick and tired. But I guess they also don't have like regular 9 to 5s, which I think would change it a
yes.
lot. But
Yeah.
like,
And they're like filming, like it's part of like what you're supposed to do, but
but I'm just like,
still.
man, I feel like me in my 30s is like a 65-year-old. Like,
No. Well, even when even when you like they first started the show, like they were like, let's say they were like so poor, right? Like their apartments were so bad, like they were all living off of like waitress and bartender like salaries. Um and I could never imagine how much alcohol they purchased. Like they were always going out and buying drinks, and I'm like, I don't have the money to buy that many drinks. Like if I get like one or two, if I get like two things at like a restaurant or something, I'm like, wow, I'm going ham tonight. Like I got
yeah,
two drinks, like so
especially in
expensive.
like LA.
Exactly. And like, yeah, and Sassy always talks about how like, yeah, they were so skinny back then because they couldn't afford to
Yeah,
eat. And it's like, well, you were definitely drinking your calories then.
that's
You were
true.
definitely spending your money somehow. Yeah, it's old school Vanderpump Rules. So
The
good.
best.
The best, the classics. Um, yeah. So yeah. So this is kind of where the conversation really goes, right? Like Paige and Amanda are basically giving Lindsay like the same out that Paige had given Amanda a couple years ago of like, it's never too late. Like it is much easier to postpone a wedding or call it off than it is to get a divorce in a couple of months. And like you don't have to go through with this. And conversely, the boys are very much having that conversation with Carl at the same time of like, you don't have to go through with this. Like you guys are at a place where like maybe you should reevaluate like what your next step is.
But do you not
And
watch this, specifically the one with Paige saying this to Lindsay
to
and be
Lindsay.
like, we're still gonna go with the blindsided story, eh?
Well, I mean, yeah,
Your friends are literally
apparently,
going, do you want to
literally,
do this? Actually, not
yeah.
even your friends, which is kind of worse. Like,
Just these random people you do a house share
like
with
people
each
who don't
year.
even really like you very much are like,
Yeah,
we're worried.
yeah. I mean, yeah, I know the whole. I mean, I don't know, right? Especially because like I noticed that this episode is July 22nd, so we're like a month away from the actual breakup happening.
Yeah,
So
but
it's like just like,
her narrative is still that until the last 2 weeks, things were good.
Yeah.
It's
But
like
that's just it.
you've
Like, what
literally
else
been
are we
sleeping
gonna
in different
see?
rooms.
What else are we gonna see? What else is gonna come
That's
out
true, eh?
in the next like
It's been
month?
so bad. Like,
It's
there's
been so
just been like,
bad.
I really didn't think that it would come out this quickly and
Yeah.
evolve
And
this quickly.
yeah. And they leave this episode as like a cliffhanger, right? Like this is a to be continued situation. And you're just like, oh boy, okay, what is the to be continued? Like, what's gonna happen next? Like, okay.
That's true.
Oi, yeah,
There's been a lot of to be continued. They even did a to
there
be
has.
continued on the Valley, and you're like, this feels not really
That's not
needed.
necessary. We didn't need that. We're not there yet. Come on. Yeah, puts to be continued to shame. But yeah, overall, very interesting episode. I think
Yeah, I agree.
a pretty good one. A pretty good one. Definitely got to some juicy stuff in there.
Yeah, followed by an interesting after show.
Yeah. So should we get into it a little bit?
Yeah.
We can just kind of quickly go over some of
Yeah,
the
speed round.
details. So the first part really like doesn't get into a whole lot of information. They kind of talk about like Carl, Lindsay, and like their like intimacy situation, and they talk about the Austen and like Ciara and Wes situation, and it's just kind of like, okay, well that was a bit of a non-event. Part two, however, there's a lot going on. So as you mentioned, they do talk about the whole like Friday night fight thing, and use Carl using this as his like avoidance tactic. I loved it because Ciara is like, "Am I stupid? Because it's not about Friday."
It's
Just
not
like,
about the pasta.
it's not about the pasta, guys. It's really not.
I just watched that episode.
And it's not about Friday. She is right. It is accurate.
But Friday Night Fight does have a really good ring.
It does. It has a great ring to it. And I understand what Carl was trying to do here. I do think it's kind of interesting that one thing that comes out of this little after show is that we get confirmation from Lindsay that like she did not know that was why Carl didn't come that night.
Yeah,
And
that's what we were speculating.
yeah, and that's messed up too because it's like, okay, so Wes, Ciara, and Jesse knew the week before that you weren't coming on Friday because you wanted to avoid having a fight with Lindsay, and Lindsay didn't even know
That's true.
that you were doing that.
That's
not
it.
good.
This is one thing that made me kind of, think about this
Double
as
take.
well. That like,
yeah,
I don't agree with a lot of things that Lindsay's done this season so far, but yeah, Craig also needs to kind of man up and like
Carl.
Oh yeah, not Craig. Carl needs to man up to a certain point and like confront her on these things.
Yeah, that's just it. And I'm sorry, like you guys are also like doing couples therapy. It kind of sounds like it happened in between like last weekend and this weekend. And like you still didn't be like, like, hey, like this is the perfect opportunity. We're paying this person probably ungodly amounts of money to like tell us about our situation, and like we're supposed to talk about it here. And I'm not going to tell you like I'm not coming up on Friday because I don't want to be around you on a Friday night, because I think that's the problem. Like,
yeah,
right?
I mean,
just what?
Yeah, I'm just thinking of like I'm literally like a meme is writing itself. Like you can't fight if you don't. No Friday night fights if we don't go to the Hamptons.
We're not there together at the same time.
But yeah, like this he should have said something, and
yeah,
like that part I think is definitely fair. Although I would definitely not want to go head to head in a confrontation with Lindsay. I would probably cry immediately.
Yeah, but like at the same time, it's like you signed up for this, right? Like you kind of knew going into it that this was probably going to be like what your conversations were going to be like.
Well, this is it. I think
like, you also wouldn't date Lindsay, right? As somebody who's maybe not so confrontational.
Yeah, that's true too. I think she'd be a super fun friend. Here's the thing. I feel like fundamentally we've been saying this is just that like they just weren't compatible with each other. Like and I feel like they knew these things going into it, and I guess Carl thought that maybe she would change, and then I guess Lindsay thought that he would be okay with how she acted, because she did say in the after show too, she's like, you proposed to me knowing all these things, which isn't, I don't know, it's like fair. And we literally just talked about this before on how like I don't think either of them were being honest with themselves or with each other. But to a certain, there is a part of you that's like, you did know this, like Jesse even asked him, he's like, was she always like this? Like is this
Yeah.
surprising to you? Like,
Yeah, and he was like, yeah, yeah, I guess this is kind of what she's like. Yeah. Whoops. Yeah, and that's just it. And like I think actually, Paige quite rightly kind of like brings up in this moment or in the after show, um, it's very easy to fall in love with this, right? It's very easy to fall in love with the lights and the camera and the glamour and the whole experience and like the Instagram likes and that kind of thing. And you get caught up a little bit in the experience of being a couple in the public facing world when everybody loves you. And it's like super easy to like that part and not really kind of like deal with the hard part of like the relationship and like what you actually need to like be dealing with in order to be able to set yourself up for success, like set up
mm-hmm.
the foundation of your relationship.
Yeah.
um and yeah, it's and so yeah, so maybe Carl kind of like got swept up in the moment and he wanted the relationship, he wanted the marriage, he wanted to take that next step, he was ready for that. He's like, I'm sober now, like I'm in a good place, like let's get married, let's move on, let's build a new life together. And he wasn't maybe like necessarily so like cognizant of who he was doing that with, or like the actual
Yeah.
person that he was like, the
I mean,
actual like real person of the Lindsay, like who she is and who he is. And
yeah. I do
yeah,
think they both really did love each other. I don't
yeah.
doubt that. But I also know that these two people have wanted to be married and have a family for a long time. They're obviously,
Hmm.
are they 40 or almost
They're
40?
like getting towards 40.
Like,
I think Lindsay's like
yeah.
38.
I think the really sad part is like I think they just probably both got a little bit like, this is the end goal. We want a
Hmm.
family.
Yeah,
We want to make this work.
yeah,
Um,
I think so.
and I like that's scary, like, to be
It
honest, like
is.
to think about starting over at that time. Like,
Hmm.
luckily I do think they're both doing a lot better, and
Yeah,
like while it might be hard in the moment, ultimately their lives are going to be better for it. But like
yeah.
it is also a scary thing to confront.
It is a scary thing to confront, and it is like, I think ultimately Carl made the right decision. And I think it's going to be hard for Lindsay to kind of like maybe accept that or admit that, or not kind of like paint it as like, oh, you knew what you were getting into, you knew what, like, and that's just it. I think that she's not kind of like fully there yet. She's still kind of painting it as like, no, you knew who I was. And it's like,
Yeah.
no, maybe he didn't really know who you were
I
actually.
I wonder if
Like,
like they just didn't get engaged and they just continued to date on like a kind of slower pace, if they would
mhm.
have been able to work through it.
I don't think they would have been able to work through it, but I think that they wouldn't. I think that when things started to go south, it would have been easier for them to break apart.
Right. And it wouldn't have been
And
as like destructive.
yeah, exactly.
Kyle does have some interesting things, which I actually appreciate. Honestly, Kyle has really been like going to bat for Carl.
Yeah. Yes.
When he's like, we saw Lindsay go on kind of this PR spin and say she was blindsided, and he's
Hmm.
like, did she forget that we filmed a show?
Yes. Well, and that, so this is kind of what I thought was interesting about Carl and Kyle's performance during the after show, is because he brings up like, um he kind of like believes that, like, looking back, that he did the right thing, and he did everything that he could to like make sure that this relationship could work. And so he kind of like can like look back and like not regret anything. And Kyle, as you say, takes the opportunity to be like, well, did she even know that we were filming a reality show? Like, we all saw this play out. And it's just so different, their approach to talking about this relationship in this moment in the after show, than everybody else's, because everybody else is talking about the episode, and they're talking about like this whole other big picture. They're like, hey, this is another opportunity for me to get on my soapbox and talk about how,
Yeah, but
a I, as Carl, should have broken up with Lindsay, that I made the right decision. And Kyle's like, we filmed a reality show, like,
to be fair, Lindsay had already been going on this, like,
yeah,
she's already said all of her things,
that's
and
true, that's true.
Carl has kind of kept quiet. That, like, I think
Yeah,
now is his opportunity to, like,
yeah.
I don't blame them for taking that approach.
No, I don't blame them for taking that approach. I just think I noticed that that's still like, no matter what, it's still a calculated decision to like
Oh
take the
yeah.
opportunity to be like, hey, this is our take on it. And it's just interesting too that it's like Kyle and Carl as this united front of like us against Lindsay,
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah, without saying that in so many words.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
It'll be a
Any
really interesting reunion.
yeah, it's oh my god, it's gonna be a crazy reunion. I'm literally so excited. I can't wait. It's just such a good season. It's just such a good season.
It's a
I
really
just
good
I'm
season.
so happy.
I feel like there's some sort of
I'm so
law
happy.
now. Like since like the early seasons of VPR and Summer House, when we've had just
Yeah.
like good seasons, I feel like
Yeah.
whenever we have a good season, we have a flop season, and then we'll have a
Yeah.
good season.
Yeah.
Like,
Is that just it? It's just kind of like up and down. That's just it. Very floppy VPR season, very good summer house season. And that happened last year with VPR where we had amazing
yeah,
VPR season, really floppy summer house
yeah.
season. So, you know, the universe and balance and all that good stuff is happening. So at least that. But yeah, that's basically what happens in the episode and in the after show.
Yeah, it was a good one. Let us
It was a
know
good
your
one.
thoughts.
Yeah.